History is filled with brilliant discoveries, groundbreaking ideas, and innovations that transformed civilization. But hidden among the triumphs are inventions that didn't quite succeed. Ideas that were imaginative, bold, or strangely hopeful, but ultimately impractical, unnecessary, or completely absurd. And yet, there's something deeply charming about them. These useless inventions reveal a softer side of human creativity, the desire to solve problems that don't exist, to push the boundaries of imagination, or simply to experiment without fear of failure. Each forgotten device tells a story of eccentric inventors, shifting cultural beliefs, and humanity's endless willingness to explore the unknown. In this calming script, we'll journey through time to examine the most useless inventions ever created. In each section, you will discover fascinating new details, different eras, different objects, and different motivations, never repeating themes, always opening a new window into human quirkiness. Let us begin. Section 1. The Anti-Bandit Suit, a fashionable failure of the 1920s. In the early decades of the 20th century, a strange sense of optimism mixed with anxiety swept through Europe and North America. Technology was advancing rapidly. Cars replaced horses, telephones shrank the distance between cities, and modern cities hummed with electricity. Yet alongside this progress, a new public fear emerged: the idea that modern thieves were becoming more dangerous, more resourceful, and more unpredictable. Into this environment stepped a bizarre invention, the anti-bandit suit. This unusual creation was marketed as a revolutionary solution to personal threats. It was a full-body outfit made of thick, armored materials, meant to protect the wearer from attacks by criminals. Fashioned with metal plates, reinforced leather, and hidden compartments, the suit claimed to offer a near-impenetrable shield against robbers, street assailants, and any other misfortunes that city life could bring. The idea behind it was ambitious, that the average citizen could feel as safe as a knight stepping into battle. But as impressive as the concept sounded, the practical execution was questionable. The most useless inventions often stem from misunderstandings about real problems, and the anti-bandit suit is a perfect example. Despite its dramatic promises, it was extraordinarily heavy. So heavy, in fact, that the wearer could barely walk. Advertisements from the time assured that mobility remains unhindered, but eyewitness accounts told a different story. People who tried early prototypes shuffled slowly, like medieval soldiers stuck in glue. Everyday tasks, such as stepping onto a curb, entering a taxi, or even turning around, became clumsy challenges. It didn't help that the suit itself was remarkably loud. Every movement produced a series of metallic clanks, scraping sounds, and stiff rustling. Thieves hardly needed to attack the wearer. They could simply follow the noise echoing half a block away. The suit didn't make you safer. It made you more noticeable. But the creators insisted that protection was more important than subtlety. One of the funniest design elements was the helmet, which was shaped like an oversized metal bowl. Its purpose was to protect the head from blunt impacts, but its effect was almost comical. Once you strapped it on, your field of vision narrowed drastically. Peripheral vision disappeared entirely, making it impossible to react quickly or react at all. Many who tested it bumped into lampposts, door frames, and even one another. The helmet protected your skull, perhaps, but at the cost of your awareness. Another bizarre feature was the inclusion of spring-loaded countermeasures inside the sleeves. The designers believed that the suit needed a form of offense, not just defense. So they added a system that, when triggered, would release a burst of chalk powder or foul-smelling spray toward an attacker. The idea was meant to be ingenious. In practice, the trigger was faulty, and many early demonstrations ended in disaster. The chalk exploded prematurely, blinding the wearer. The foul spray occasionally leaked inside the helmet, causing the victim to faint or vomit. It became clear that the suit was far more dangerous to the wearer than to any would-be criminal. Despite its flaws, newspapers took great interest in the invention. Photographs of men standing stiffly in armored clothing, attempting to walk with dignity, amused and puzzled the public. Some people were drawn to it as a novelty, imagining themselves walking through the city as armored guardians. Others simply saw it as a comedic spectacle. Nonetheless, the suit garnered enough attention that several wealthy individuals ordered custom versions, not for safety, but for the amusement of owning something so peculiar. The anti-bandit suit ultimately failed for the most obvious reason. It didn't solve a real problem. Street crime wasn't so rampant that people needed full-body armor to go shopping or attend work. And even if they did, the suit would have slowed them down so much that it practically invited trouble rather than preventing it. But in examining this useless invention, we see a fascinating reflection of the era. Society was entering an unfamiliar world of new technologies and fast-paced lifestyles. People feared the unknown. They worried that criminals would use new tools or methods. And so, when someone promised an invention that could offer absolute protection, even if it was impractical, the idea sparked curiosity and hope. The anti-bandit suit stands today not as a triumph of engineering, but as a humorous reminder that fear, innovation, and creativity can merge in unexpected ways. It teaches us that humans are willing to imagine solutions, even absurd ones, when confronted with uncertainty. Useless inventions are often born not from foolishness, but from the desire to feel safe, prepared, and in control. And perhaps that is why these inventions are so charming. They reveal the innocence behind our deepest concerns. The suit may have been impractical, but the intention behind it was deeply human. Section 2. The Portable Sauna, a sweaty dream that made no sense. The early 1900s were a time of contradictions. People were fascinated by technology, electricity, machinery, industrial systems, but they were also equally fascinated by the idea of comfort, rejuvenation, and luxurious self-care. This was the era when wellness trends truly began to blossom. Tonic drinks promised eternal youth, Massage belts claimed to shake away fat, and beauty machines buzzed with mysterious electrical currents supposedly capable of sculpting the body. It was within this strange merging of science and self-indulgence that one of history's most useless inventions quietly emerged, the portable, personal sauna. To modern eyes, the concept seems bizarre. After all, traditional saunas are spacious, built of wood, and designed to envelop the body in steam or dry heat. They are communal spaces, or at least large, comfortable rooms that allow a person to recline, relax, and breathe freely. But inventors in the early 20th century asked a different question. Why should relaxation require a room? Why not bring the sauna directly to the person? And so, the portable sauna was born. Imagine a large padded fabric bag that resembled an oversized quilt zipped into a cylindrical shape. The user would crawl inside, sitting upright, with only their head sticking out of a small hole at the top. Tight drawstrings were pulled around the neck to keep the heat from escaping. Inside the enclosure, a small heating unit, often powered by electricity, sometimes by heated stones, pumped warmth into the confined space, creating a miniature sauna experience. Advertisements at the time enthusiastically proclaimed, "Your personal spa. Sweat away toxins anywhere, at home, on vacation, even at the office." However, the reality of using the portable sauna was far from luxurious. Once a person zipped themselves inside, the first thing they noticed was the unescapable claustrophobia. The walls sat inches from the body, pressing gently but constantly, like a sleeping bag that had been shrunken in a wash cycle. The lack of legroom meant sitting still for the entire session. Even shifting positions could cause the sauna to topple over. Early users reported feeling not relaxed, but trapped, suspended between wellness and panic. Then came the heat itself. Traditional saunas allow warm air to circulate freely, but in this fabric capsule, the heat built unevenly, pooling around the legs and chest in unpredictable waves. One minute it was merely warm. The next, it felt like a scorching pocket of air was attacking the skin. There was no way to adjust your position to cool down, no space to stretch, and no option to step out quickly. This made the experience deeply uncomfortable and, ironically, less safe than a normal sauna. But the most alarming flaw was ventilation. With only the head exposed, the rest of the body remained sealed inside a heat chamber with very little airflow. Some inventions attempted to include little vents or mesh windows, but they did nothing to help. Users emerged coated in sweat, dizzy from the stagnant heat, and sometimes lightheaded from the buildup of humidity. It wasn't rejuvenation, it was survival. One of the more humorous accounts came from a newspaper review in the 1930s, where a journalist described testing the sauna in his living room. At first, he felt self-conscious, sitting on a chair with his body zipped inside what looked like a giant padded laundry bag. But after several minutes, the experience shifted from awkward to alarming. As the heat intensified, the fabric bag began to sag inward, clinging to his legs and chest. He attempted to escape, only to discover that the zipper, swollen from moisture, had jammed. He had to shout for assistance before a friend rushed over to free him. The article concluded with a dry comment. A portable sauna may be useful, but perhaps not for the faint of heart, nor those who value easy exits. Despite its flaws, the portable sauna did gain a small following. People were enamored with the concept of personal wellness on demand. They imagined themselves sweating elegantly, detoxifying their bodies without needing to visit a bathhouse or gym. The idea of self-care was new and exciting, and the portable sauna seemed futuristic, even luxurious. But the more these devices were used, the clearer their impracticality became. Cleaning them was a nightmare. After each session, the interior was soaked with condensation, requiring hours of drying time to prevent mold. The heating units often malfunctioned, overheating or shutting off unpredictably, and the portability, a key selling point, was a mild exaggeration. Most units were bulky, heavy, and awkward to carry. They could be technically moved from one place to another, but not gracefully, not easily, and certainly not discreetly. Yet the most fascinating aspect of the portable sauna wasn't the device itself, but what it represented. It revealed something profound about human nature. Our desire to compress comfort into convenience. Throughout history, people have been willing to experiment, innovate, and even endure discomfort if they believe it will improve their health or happiness. The portable sauna wasn't created by fools. It was created by dreamers who believed relaxation could be made accessible, personal, and intimate. And in a way, they were ahead of their time. Modern wellness trends include infrared sauna blankets, portable steam tents, and foldable spa capsules, ideas not so distant from their clunky ancestors. The difference is, technology has improved. Materials are safer. Designs are more breathable, more flexible, more comfortable. But the spirit behind them, it's almost identical. The original portable saunas were useless in a practical sense. They failed in comfort, ventilation, safety, and mobility, but they succeeded in sparking imagination. They dared to shrink an entire spa experience into something you could set up in your bedroom. They were strange, sometimes ridiculous, yet undeniably innovative. History often remembers brilliance, but it also remembers boldness. And sometimes, useless inventions are simply brilliant ideas born before their time. Section 3. The Anti-Bandit Umbrella, a weapon nobody needed. History has gifted us an astonishing number of strange inventions, some whimsical, some bizarre, and some so profoundly unnecessary that we can only appreciate them now as charming relics of human creativity. Yet among all these curiosities, few inventions stand as boldly unnecessary as the anti-bandit umbrella. To understand why it existed at all, we must travel back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a time when cities were swelling, anxieties were rising, and the imagination of inventors was absolutely unrestrained. The world was industrializing at breakneck speed. Electricity had just begun lighting the streets. Automobiles were replacing carriages, and factories were pumping out everyday goods in quantities unimaginable a century before. Inventions were everywhere, and the culture of the era developed an almost feverish belief that everything could be improved with a clever mechanism or an unusual twist. This mindset created not only useful innovations, like elevators and telephones, but also countless contraptions that tried to solve problems that barely existed. One such problem was the imagined threat of highwaymen, thieves, and lurking city bandits who, according to sensationalized newspapers, hid behind every corner, waiting to strike unsuspecting pedestrians. The truth is that crime did exist, but it was nowhere near as dramatic as newspapers made it seem. Still, fear sells, and manufacturers noticed. Enter the anti-bandit umbrella, a peculiar device meant to protect the everyday citizen from hypothetical dangers while also providing shade from rain or sun. At first glance, it resembled a normal umbrella, but its appearance was deceiving. The shaft contained a hidden mechanism, sometimes a retractable metal spike, sometimes a set of brass knuckles disguised in the handle, and occasionally even a spring-loaded club meant to extend from the tip with a single twist. The idea was that, should a bandit approach, instead of running or shouting for help, the citizen could dramatically transform their umbrella into a defensive weapon, startling the attacker and gaining the upper hand. Advertisements claimed it would make any pedestrian entirely secure on urban streets. Illustrations showed well-dressed men and women confidently striding through alleyways, umbrella in hand, prepared to fend off villains with the flair of adventure novel heroes. But reality was far less glamorous. In practice, using the anti-bandit umbrella was awkward at best, dangerous at worst, and always unintentionally comedic. The mechanisms, despite being promoted as sleek and efficient, were notoriously temperamental. The retractable spike could jam, the spring-loaded club could backfire, the internal gears rusted easily. If the umbrella was even slightly wet, an unavoidable condition for an umbrella, the entire system became stiff and unreliable. Some users reported that the weaponized part would activate spontaneously, often at the most inconvenient moments, during a polite conversation, at church, in a crowded shop, or while simply trying to close the umbrella after a rainstorm. Imagine walking home, hearing a crack of thunder, and raising your umbrella for protection, only for a hidden metal spike to shoot out with a loud snap, sending startled passers-by leaping backwards in fright. The umbrella might keep the rain off, but it would also attract the attention of every person within a 20-meter radius. Instead of offering safety, it caused embarrassment and occasionally minor injuries. And the weight, oh, the weight. Because of the hidden components, the umbrella was significantly heavier than a normal one. Some weighed as much as a brick. Carrying it all day was exhausting, and using it as a cane only made the mechanical parts rattle ominously. Far from making people feel secure, the umbrella often made them feel like they were hauling around some sort of unpredictable contraption that could explode into motion at any moment. Yet perhaps the most amusing flaw was that it simply wasn't useful. Even if bandits had lurked in every shadow, the umbrella's elaborate system was too slow to deploy in a real emergency. Drawings showed elegant ladies pulling the hidden spike with perfect grace, but real users fumbled with knobs, levers, and stiff springs, often taking an entire minute to activate the mechanism, much too long in a confrontation. If anything, it was the bandit who would have had time to watch, blink in confusion, and quietly leave the scene, perhaps feeling slightly offended. Still, the anti-bandit umbrella did manage to sell. People loved the novelty. There was a certain charm in owning something unusual, something clever, something just a little bit theatrical. The umbrella wasn't so much a tool of self-defense as it was a conversation piece. Guests would ask about it, and the owner would demonstrate its hidden features with the pride of a magician revealing a secret trick. Even if it never saved anyone from danger, it could certainly entertain a dinner party. But what truly makes this invention fascinating is not the object itself, it's the mindset behind it. The anti-bandit umbrella emerged during a time when society was transitioning rapidly into modernity. People felt excitement, but also uncertainty. Change was happening everywhere. New machines, new cities, new technologies, new kinds of work. With these changes came anxieties about safety, identity, and control. The umbrella, even in its absurdity, represented a symbolic comfort, an object that suggested you could be prepared for anything, even the unknown. It also reflected a certain theatrical flair of the era. This was a time of Sherlock Holmes, penny novels, detective stories, and romanticized tales of mystery and crime. People didn't want to merely feel safe. They wanted to feel like characters in an adventure. Owning an anti-bandit umbrella allowed them the harmless fantasy of bravery, a dramatic prop that turned mundane walks into imagined escapades. In another way, the invention revealed something deeply human, our tendency to over-engineer solutions to problems that either don't exist or don't require such complexity. Section 4. The Anti-Bandit Bicycle Trap. There's something soothing about looking back on the past and realizing that people, despite their best intentions, often created things that made no sense at all. And with every invention that failed, humanity quietly learned a little bit more about how the world truly works. This section is a gentle dive into one of those strange attempts at brilliance, a device meant to protect the innocent, defend the streets, and stop crime on a bicycle. Yes, a bicycle. Let us step softly into the story of the anti-bandit bicycle trap, one of history's more useless and unintentionally comedic creations. Imagine the late 1800s, when cities were growing rapidly, electricity was still a marvel, and bicycles were quickly becoming the hottest trend in personal transportation. People rode them everywhere, to work, to markets, through parks, down crowded streets. They were cheap, fast, and surprisingly freeing for that era. Naturally, where there were bicycles, there were bicycle thieves. Thievery was nothing new, but bicycle theft arrived almost overnight as a widespread annoyance, and people scrambled to find solutions. Locks existed, of course, but many were flimsy. Streets weren't closely monitored, And so inventors stepped forward with ideas that ranged from mildly creative to genuinely unhinged. One such inventor believed he had solved the rising crime problem with a stroke of genius, or at least something he thought was genius. He created what he called the anti-bandit bicycle trap, though later newspapers cheekily nicknamed it the self-vigilante bike. The concept was simple in theory. If a thief tried to steal your bicycle, the bicycle would take revenge. How? In ways that sound more like a mischievous prank than an actual security system. The trap was built into the frame, saddle, and handlebars of the bike. The idea was that if someone mounted the bicycle without disabling the hidden safety switch, the trap would activate. And when it activated, well, the bicycle didn't exactly become a weapon. More like a chaotic, inconvenient, and occasionally painful surprise. Different versions existed, but the main mechanisms included sudden handlebar lock. The thief begins pedaling confidently, only for the handlebars to snap into a fixed, immovable position, sending the rider swerving unexpectedly into the nearest wall, tree, or patch of unfortunate shrubbery. Exploding ink pouch. Upon sitting on the saddle, a packet of indelible blue dye bursts underneath the thief, permanently staining their clothes and backside, marking them like a mischievous school prank. Detachable pedals. As soon as the thief tries to pick up speed, both pedals would simply fall off, leaving the rider, leg flailing in mid-air, before tipping over in slow-motion humiliation. Wheel lock brake. Invisible from the outside, but if triggered, the back wheel would clamp down with a sudden force, stopping the bicycle dead, while the rider, unfortunately, did not stop quite as quickly. These were not life-threatening traps, but they were very good at causing embarrassment, minor bruises, and a healthy amount of chaos. The inventor proudly demonstrated his device at a public exhibition, and at first the crowd applauded. What a creative idea! Finally, a way to outsmart criminals. But then came the real test. Volunteers, unaware of which traps were active on each bike, attempted to mount and ride them. The result was pure slapstick comedy. People toppled sideways into hay bales. A man in a fine suit received a blue stain so severe that he had to leave the event wrapped in a borrowed curtain. Another volunteer ended up rolling down a small hill after the pedals gave out mid-demonstration. The crowd laughed so hard that the exhibition turned into more of a comedy show than an unveiling of serious anti-theft technology. Newspapers wrote about it with amused skepticism. Crime prevention boards found it imaginative but impractical, and bicycle manufacturers didn't want to deal with the lawsuits that would inevitably arise if a regular owner accidentally triggered the trap themselves, which happened more often than the inventor cared to admit. Because unfortunately, that was the fatal problem. The bicycle didn't know the difference between a thief and its rightful owner. People forgot to switch off the mechanisms. They triggered the traps by accident. Many owners ended up being thrown by their own bicycles, stained with ink by their own saddles, or humiliated in front of neighbors they'd greeted moments earlier. In some cities, the devices were outright banned after a wave of self-inflicted bicycle mishaps. One newspaper gently summarized the device's downfall with the headline, "The only person this bicycle caught was its owner." As time passed, the anti-bandit bicycle trap faded into obscurity, not because it was dangerous in the traditional sense, but because it simply didn't work as intended. It punished everyone equally, with no discrimination between good and bad intentions. And while it may not have reduced crime, it did provide the world with a moment of humor and a reminder that sometimes even clever ideas can become wonderfully useless in practice. Still, there is something strangely calming about inventions like this. They speak to a human desire to solve problems creatively, sometimes wildly creatively, even if the result is more comedic than helpful. They show that imagination often comes before refinement, and they remind us that failure can be part of progress, not the end of it. If anything, the anti-bandit bicycle trap stands as a small monument to the idea that innovation doesn't always need to succeed to be meaningful. Sometimes it only needs to be attempted, and in the gentle unfolding of history, these odd missteps become stories that make us smile, soften our judgments, and appreciate the winding, curious path that brought us to where we are now. In the end, perhaps its most interesting legacy is the image it leaves in our minds. A determined bicycle owner, proud of their new anti-theft device, climbing onto their own bike, only to be immediately flung into a bush by the very invention meant to protect them. A perfect symbol of well-meaning uselessness, and a reminder that even the strangest ideas can become strangely comforting stories over time. Section 5. The electrically heated butter knife. Imagine for a moment a quiet breakfast table somewhere in the 1910s. The sun is barely peeking over the horizon. The kettle whistles softly, and a loaf of bread waits beside a pat of cold butter, hard, unyielding, straight from the icebox. Someone, perhaps frustrated by the eternal struggle between cold butter and soft bread, believed they had solved one of humanity's oldest morning battles. Their solution? Something bold, something innovative, something spectacularly unnecessary. They called it the electrically heated butter knife. At first glance, it seemed like a stroke of genius. Plug the knife into a small socket, let the metal warm, and spread butter effortlessly. No more torn bread, no more frustration, no more wrestling with a stubborn block of dairy. Yet, despite its practical promise, the invention drifted into history, not as a triumph, but as a beautifully extravagant failure. One of those ideas that makes you wonder if the inventor was simply too clever for the world around them. The concept itself was harmless, almost elegant. The knife featured a hollow metal handle housing a tiny resistive coil that, when powered, heated the blade to the perfect butter melting temperature. That was the theory. In practice, however, the knife often heated far too quickly, or not enough, or unpredictably. It could take several minutes, longer than it took to soften butter naturally. And when it finally did heat up, it sometimes melted the butter so rapidly that it slid everywhere except onto the bread. A tidy, functional breakfast quickly transformed into a buttery battlefield. Yet the charm of the invention lives in the details. Promotional pamphlets described it with almost poetic promise. Bring modern convenience to your table. Save time, save effort. Enjoy perfectly spread butter every morning. But the knife required a cord at the breakfast table, a cord that dangled precariously near toast crumbs, coffee spills, and curious children. One accidental tug, and the whole table became an electrical hazard. Then there was the maintenance. Because the heating element was fragile, owners were advised not to wash the knife normally. Instead, they were told to wipe it with a soft, slightly damp cloth, never fully submerging it, never letting water reach the wiring. Imagine trying to clean butter off a metal blade without actually washing it. The result was inevitable. The knife became, within weeks, sticky, greasy, and slightly terrifying. Still, the invention persisted for a while because it belonged to an era bursting with optimism. People believed electricity could and should solve every minor inconvenience. There were electric curling tongs, electric dish heaters, electric hat drying stands. If electricity existed, someone tried to put it into something. And so the heated butter knife joined a parade of questionable, delightful creations meant to modernize life in small, flashy ways. But the true heart of this invention lies not in its impracticality, but in what it represented. It whispered a quiet truth about humanity, that sometimes we invent things not because we truly need them, but because we want to feel like we're improving the world, even in tiny ways. The heated butter knife was less about butter and more about imagination. Our belief that even the simplest daily ritual could be transformed by a spark of innovation. Yet practicality always catches up. Manufacturers faced an obvious question. Why would anyone buy an expensive, fragile electrical tool when they already owned a perfectly effective butter knife? And more importantly, who needed their butter warmer when their own hands, or a few minutes at room temperature, could achieve the same effect for free? Despite its shortcomings, the invention left a surprisingly profound mark. It inspired the first attempts to design temperature-controlled kitchen utensils, ignitioning conversations among engineers about the future of household devices. In some obscure way, it stood at the crossroads between novelty gadgets and long-term innovation. And there is something almost comforting about imagining someone, more than a century ago, sitting at their workbench at night, sketching plans, soldering tiny wires, trying to solve what felt like a universal annoyance. They weren't trying to change the world. They were trying to make breakfast a little easier. It is such a small, human motivation, and in that smallness, there is beauty. This invention reminds us that creativity doesn't always lead to success, but it always tells a story. And this story is gentle, simple, and strangely grounding. It encourages us to look at the quirks of human nature with affectionate amusement. After all, we all have moments where we try to simplify life in ways that turn out to be far more complicated. Even now, replicas of the heated butter knife appear occasionally in antique shops. sitting quietly on dusty shelves, their cords neatly wrapped around the handle. People pick them up, puzzled yet amused, wondering who once plugged a butter knife into a wall and believed wholeheartedly that they were stepping into the future. Because, in a way, they were. They were stepping into a world ruled by imagination, a world where breakfast could be revolutionized, where ordinary moments could be transformed, where a tiny piece of heated metal represented hope, progress, and just a hint of absurdity. And perhaps that's why this invention, despite its impracticality, has never entirely disappeared from conversations about historical oddities. It stands as both a humorous relic and a gentle reminder that even our most misguided ideas carry a spark of inspiration. In the quiet space of a morning kitchen, with soft light drifting across the table and the smell of warm bread in the air, it doesn't feel entirely ridiculous to imagine someone reaching for that strange electrical knife, believing for one hopeful moment that they had found a way to make life just a little bit easier. And in that thought, the invention becomes something more than useless. It becomes timeless in its sincerity. Section 6. The Horse-Headed Gas Mask for Children. There are few moments in history more surreal than the intersection of fear and creativity. And nothing captures that tension quite like the horse-headed gas mask designed for children during the early 20th century. At first glance, it looks like something from a whimsical storybook or a strange carnival, but beneath its bizarre exterior lies one of the most hauntingly unnecessary inventions ever created, a desperate attempt to protect children from imagined threats by transforming them into something unrecognizable. To understand why this invention existed at all, we must return to a time when fear itself felt like a living presence. After World War I introduced the world to the horrors of chemical warfare, panic spread across Europe and beyond. Communities feared a new age where poison could drift silently through the air, invisible and unstoppable. Governments encouraged preparedness, civilians stocked emergency kits, and inventors raced to find solutions, often rushed, often impractical, and often created in a haze of anxiety. The horse-headed gas mask was one such solution. It was designed for children, but its creators knew children might panic at the sight of the standard industrial gas masks of the era. Dark rubber, bulging glass eyes, and long snouts like something torn from a nightmare. The fear of frightening children led to an idea that now seems almost incomprehensible. Make the gas mask cute. They replaced harsh rubber with soft, rounded edges. They gave the mask a friendly muzzle, soft ears, and painted-on eyes meant to seem gentle. The result was a device shaped almost like a plush toy, yet its purpose was anything but playful. In the minds of its designers, the approach made sense. If children could be comforted, if they could see the mask not as a thing of terror, but as a familiar, friendly shape, they might wear it willingly during emergencies. The choice of a horse was symbolic too. Horses were helpful, loyal, noble animals, admired by children across many cultures. The inventors believed this symbolism would inspire courage and calm. What they did not anticipate was that instead of creating comfort, the mask created confusion and fear of a different kind. Though the horse features were meant to be charming, they ended up looking uncanny. The painted eyes were too large, the snout too stiff, the ears oddly pointed. Photos from the era show children wearing them, standing stiffly, their small hands tucked by their sides. Their faces fully hidden within the mask's unsettling gaze. Far from comforting, the masks gave the impression of a world where innocence had been replaced by a cold, eerie mimicry of animal life. Parents were equally disturbed. Many felt the masks turned their children into unrecognizable creatures. Others worried that the unfamiliar shape would make communication impossible during emergencies. Some even believed the appearance of the mask would confuse or frighten enemy soldiers. But in the long list of concerns, that one mattered least. The real issue was simply that the mask solved no actual problem. The device was cumbersome, awkward, and poorly sealed. The ventilation system was unreliable. The filters were cheap and ineffective against the very gases the mask was supposed to block. The straps did not fit snugly on small heads. And worst of all, children often refused to wear them, not because the mask was frightening, but because it was uncomfortable and heavy. Despite these failures, the invention became a strange cultural artifact, featured in newspapers, displayed in civil defense exhibitions, and even promoted in some parenting magazines. Many adults claimed to admire the creativity behind it, yet almost no one trusted it enough to rely on it. The mask existed in an odd limbo, admired, photographed, discussed, but never truly used. What makes this invention so fascinating is that it came from a place of profound tenderness. Its creators did not want to frighten children. They wanted to protect them. They wanted to soften harsh realities with gentleness and imagination. They wanted to transform fear into something a child could hold on to, something familiar, something almost comforting. But in doing so, they uncovered an unsettling truth, that sometimes the more we try to disguise danger, the more frightening it becomes. The mask also reveals the complexity of human reaction to fear. When the world feels unstable, people often reach for ideas, any ideas that promise even a tiny sense of control. We create tools, rituals, symbols, and sometimes bizarre inventions that may not work, but allow us to feel less powerless. The horse-headed gas mask stands at that crossroads between logic and emotion, between practicality and hope. It is a reminder that humans are endlessly creative, even when the circumstances seem hopeless. It shows how imagination can bloom in the darkest moments, but also how imagination, when guided by fear, can drift into the strange and absurd. Today, these masks sit in museums, tucked behind glass. Visitors stop, stare, and often smile with disbelief. Children ask questions like, "Why does it look like that?" And adults struggle to explain. Because how do you describe an era where the world was so afraid, people turned children into animals if they thought it might save them? Yet in that glass case, The mask tells its own story. A story not of failure, fully, but of human vulnerability, human creativity, and the desperate desire to protect what we love. It is an artifact that reminds us how deeply we wish to shield our children from harm, even if our attempts sometimes take strange forms. And above all, the horse-headed gas mask highlights a gentle truth that echoes through history. When fear becomes too big, the human mind will reach for anything, comfort, disguise, or even whimsy, to make the world feel safer. It is, in that sense, one of the most poetic, useless inventions ever created. Section 7. The heated butter knife that couldn't melt anything. There are inventions that arise from groundbreaking insight, others from bold experimentation. And then there are those that spring from a small daily frustration, only to spiral into something far stranger. The heated butter knife is one such creation, conceived to solve a trivial inconvenience, but remembered today as one of the most wonderfully useless devices ever to grace a kitchen drawer. Its origin story begins with a universal experience: trying to spread cold butter on soft bread. It is a moment that needs no explanation. The bread tears, the butter crumbles, and the simple joy of making a toast transforms into an unexpected battle. Many have sighed over this annoyance. Few have attempted to change the course of culinary history because of it. But one inventor, whose identity is mostly lost to time, decided this irritation deserved a technological revolution. Thus, the heated butter knife was born. At its core, the concept seems almost charmingly practical. A butter knife equipped with a tiny heating element, powered by batteries or a wall plug, warming the blade just enough to glide effortlessly through a cold slab of butter. In theory, it would eliminate torn bread, uneven spreading, and the chilly resistance of refrigerated dairy. In execution, however, the knife did not behave like the graceful culinary tool it was intended to be. Instead, it became an elegant demonstration of the limits of over-engineering. First, the heating element was too weak. It warmed the blade slightly, perhaps enough for someone to say, yes, that feels a little warm, but nowhere near enough to melt butter or soften it meaningfully. Even after being plugged in for several minutes, the knife remained lukewarm at best. Butter responded to it much like ice responds to sunlight in winter, barely, reluctantly, and not nearly as dramatically as advertised. This small flaw alone might have been forgivable, but the inventors persisted. Trying to improve their design, they increased the wattage. The second version heated quickly, but now too much. Instead of sliding through butter, it scorched the surface, leaving behind faint, burnt marks that carried the unmistakable aroma of heated dairy. Users described the smell as unsettling, like a toaster malfunctioning during breakfast. Worse, when used on bread, the overly warm blade sometimes left thin trails of melted butter soaked unevenly into the slice, creating a patchwork of soggy and dry spots. What was meant to be an upgrade became a culinary hazard, Another issue lay in the device's practicality. A butter knife, in its purest form, asks nothing of you. It sits in a drawer, ready and dependable, needing no maintenance, no charging, no complicated instructions. But this heated version demanded preparation. Batteries needed replacing. The cord needed to be positioned carefully to avoid tangling or touching the butter. Some models required a preheat period, which felt absurdly formal for something as simple as making toast. One user famously joked that the knife made him think deeply about the philosophy of breakfast. Why was he waiting for a tool that only made his life marginally more difficult? The most amusing complication, however, came from the cleaning process. Butter knives usually rinse easily under warm water, but this device was electronic. Washing it required caution. Some owners wiped it down carefully with damp cloths. Others took their chances and washed it normally, only to discover, predictably, that water and electricity do not mix. Many knives broke after just 1 or 2 encounters with the sink. In households where it did survive, the knife often became a conversation piece more than a tool. Guests who noticed it would lift it from its charging base with raised eyebrows, asking what purpose it served. When told, they would typically smile politely, pausing to process the idea of a butter knife that needed a power source. The irony is that while the invention failed in its intended purpose, it succeeded brilliantly as an example of the quirks of human inventiveness. The heated butter knife didn't endure because it changed lives. It endured because it symbolizes a kind of sincere but humorous ambition, the desire to fix something that wasn't broken by solving a problem that never demanded such advanced engineering. What makes this invention particularly fascinating is that it highlights a much broader pattern in history, the tendency to overcomplicate the simple. It is a reminder that humans, ever creative, often reach first for technology instead of patience. Instead of letting the butter sit at room temperature for a few minutes, or simply accepting that cold butter spreads imperfectly, someone envisioned a device that transcended all culinary tradition. The heated butter knife exists at the crossroads between necessity and novelty. On one side, it represents the practicality of trying to improve a daily task. On the other, it showcases how quickly practicality can give way to absurdity when ambition outruns usefulness. Yet despite its uselessness, the invention carries a strange charm. There is something almost endearing about the idea that someone cared enough about breakfast perfection to design a specialized tool, test it, refine it, and present it proudly to the world. It embodies a gentle kind of optimism, the belief that every problem, no matter how small, deserves a solution. And in a way, it reminds us that creativity is not always measured by success. Sometimes it is measured by the willingness to imagine something new, even if that idea ends up gathering dust beside the toaster. Today, heated butter knives still appear occasionally online, mocked, collected as novelties, or purchased by curious gift buyers seeking humorous presents for friends. They remain a testament to the playful side of invention, A wink from history that says, just because you can doesn't always mean you should. But perhaps the true beauty of the heated butter knife is that it invites us to laugh gently at ourselves. It tells us that humans, for all our sophistication, sometimes forget that an uncomplicated solution, like waiting 5 minutes for the butter to soften, can be far more effective than a complicated one. In the end, the heated butter knife stands as one of history's most harmless, delightful failures. A tiny reminder that progress can sometimes wander into the wonderfully unnecessary. Section 8. The Horse Training Machine That Terrified Horses. Among the vast catalog of inventions that promised innovation yet delivered confusion, few are as strangely unforgettable as the mechanical horse training device of the late 19th century, a contraption designed with noble intentions, built with impressive craftsmanship, and remembered today for one simple truth: horses absolutely hated it. This peculiar invention emerged during a time when human fascination with mechanization was at its peak. The Industrial Revolution had inspired engineers to believe that any physical task, no matter how nuanced, could be replicated by gears, levers, and mechanical precision. Factories hummed, steam engines roared across continents, and labor-saving devices appeared in every corner of life. So naturally, someone wondered, if machines can weave fabric and power ships, why can't they also train horses? The idea sounded visionary on paper. Horse training, after all, required patience, skill, consistency, and a deep understanding of animal behavior. It was labor-intensive, time-consuming, and sometimes dangerous. So the inventor proposed a remarkable solution: a fully mechanical apparatus that could simulate the movements, commands, and pressures of a human trainer without fatigue or emotion. But reality, as often happens, had other plans. The first model of the horse training machine was an enormous structure of wood, iron, springs, and rotating belts. It looked less like a training device and more like a medieval siege engine crossed with a carnival ride. Its intentions, however, were surprisingly delicate. The machine was supposedly designed to teach a horse to trot at a consistent pace, encourage proper posture and muscular development, simulate the shifting weight of a rider, gently tug reins to teach responsiveness, provide predictable, repeatable training without human error. In theory, it sounded like the future. In practice, horses responded with bewilderment, irritation, and in many cases, outright panic. The problem, of course, was that horses are not machines. They do not respond to rigid, repetitive patterns the way gears do. Training a horse is not merely a matter of physical pressure. It is a relationship, a nonverbal dialogue built through trust, observation, and subtle communication. Horses read body language, tone, and intention. They do not understand rotating gears or mechanical arms. The mechanical trainer failed on its very first task, convincing the horse to step onto it. Animals who had calmly accepted saddles, reins, carts, and plows took one look at the towering wooden structure, complete with spinning wheels and clanking metal, and backed away. Some refused to approach it entirely. Others would step onto the platform, only to leap off the moment it began to move. For the few horses who did tolerate the initial experience, the motions proved unnatural. The machine's attempt to simulate a rider's shifting weight was stiff, jerky, and lacking the subtlety that a real equestrian naturally provides. Instead of guiding the horse gently, the device applied pressure in abrupt pulses, throwing the animal off balance. Horses accustomed to real riders found the experience confusing and uncomfortable. Horses new to training were simply terrified. Then came the reins. The machine's mechanical arms were designed to give soft tugs, light cues that a rider might use to guide direction or speed. But machinery of the era was not known for elegance. Sometimes the reins pulled too weakly to mean anything. Other times they jerked sharply, startling the animal and sending it into a panic. In some unfortunate cases, the reins snagged or twisted, creating resistance that signaled stop, turn, and back up all at once. Imagine being a horse, standing on a vibrating wooden platform, while invisible hands tug randomly at your mouth. It was not training. It was chaos. Reports describe horses leaping off the machine mid-session, snapping parts of the device, or running across the training yard after breaking free. Others simply refused to move while on it, standing rigid with confusion while the machine churned uselessly beneath them. Word of these failures traveled quickly. Traditional horse trainers, who had relied on instinct and experience for generations, found the idea of replacing their craft with a mechanical substitute laughable. The machine quickly became an object of mild ridicule, used more often as a conversation piece than a training tool. But while the invention failed spectacularly in the equestrian world, it gained a strange kind of fame elsewhere. People would visit exhibitions simply to watch demonstrations. Crowds gathered not to admire the invention's effectiveness, but to marvel at its absurdity. They watched as demonstrators coaxed, pleaded, and occasionally bribed horses to step onto the platform. Spectators cheered when a horse complied, and laughed sympathetically when the inevitable chaos unfolded. The inventor, determined to salvage the idea, created several improved versions over the years. One model used steam power, another used foot pedals, a third introduced padded mechanical arms meant to mimic the touch of a rider's legs. But these additions only made the device more complex, not more effective. The problem was never in engineering. It was in misunderstanding the nature of the relationship between people and animals. In the end, the mechanical horse trainer became one more entry in the museum of well-intentioned but misguided innovations. Not because it lacked creativity, but because it lacked awareness of what could and could not be mechanized. The machine tried to replicate emotionless precision for a task rooted in intuition and connection. And yet, despite its impracticality, the invention has a charm that makes it memorable. It speaks to a period of history filled with bold dreams, when inventors believed nothing was beyond the reach of gears and steam. It reflects an optimism so earnest that even failure becomes admirable. And, amusingly, it reveals the limits of human confidence, the belief that we can outsmart nature with machinery, even when nature politely disagrees. The mechanical horse training machine remains fascinating today, not because it worked, but because it didn't. It teaches us that some things cannot be automated, not because technology is weak, but because life itself resists simplification. Horses need empathy, presence, and adaptability, none of which can be built from wood and iron. So the invention lives on, not in stables, but all in a cabin or cabinets, but in stories. A reminder that for all our ingenuity, the world does not always align with our plans, and that sometimes the most useless inventions are also the most delightful ones to remember. Section 9. The umbrella for shoes, a footwear innovation that never worked. In the long, strange history of human invention, some ideas are so specific, so narrowly conceived, that they seem almost absurd in hindsight. Yet, they reveal much about the imagination and sometimes desperation of their creators. Among these peculiar innovations, few are as peculiar, impractical, or entertaining as the umbrella for shoes, an invention that promised to protect one of the most overlooked parts of daily life, the feet. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were a period when urban life and weather challenges collided. Cobblestone streets, sudden downpours, and thick mud made walking a potentially hazardous affair, particularly for those wearing the delicate footwear of the time. High society women struggled with long skirts and fine leather shoes, while gentlemen prided themselves on polished boots and unsoiled trousers. The streets of London, Paris, and New York were frequently slick and muddy, and inventors were eager to devise solutions. One particularly imaginative inventor turned his attention to the feet, reasoning that shoes, constantly exposed to rain, mud, and grime, were in desperate need of protection. Thus, the umbrella for shoes was born. At first glance, the concept seemed logical. If umbrellas could shield people from the rain overhead, why not a miniature umbrella that could shield shoes from the puddles below? The design was simple in theory. The umbrella consisted of a small, collapsible canopy attached to the front of the shoe, sometimes with a rigid frame that extended upward and outward. In some variations, the canopy covered the entire shoe, while others were partial, aiming to shield only the toe or the top of the foot. The umbrella could be folded down when indoors or collapsed for storage, much like a traditional handheld umbrella. The promise of the invention was enticing. Imagine walking through a torrential downpour without muddying your boots. Imagine stepping over puddles without a second thought about soaking your shoes. It seemed revolutionary, a personal rainproofing system for the feet. Patent offices received numerous applications for similar devices, and for a brief period, the idea appeared poised to become a household accessory. But reality, as often happens with overly clever inventions, was far less accommodating. The first problem was balance. Attaching an umbrella to the front of a shoe altered the wearer's gait. Even the lightest canopy shifted the center of gravity slightly, causing people to stumble on slippery cobblestones or uneven pavement. More elaborate designs, with rigid frames and larger canopies, made walking almost impossible. Users reported tripping, catching the frame on doorways, and even falling into puddles, despite the device's intended purpose. Next came durability. Tiny mechanical parts, hinges, and collapsible frames were easily damaged by everyday wear and tear. The first time a wearer stepped into deep mud or onto a stone with an uneven surface, the delicate umbrella often bent, broke, or became entirely unusable. Rain, ironically, proved particularly unforgiving. Water pooled on the miniature canopies, adding weight and further destabilizing the wearer. Another challenge lay in aesthetics. In an era when fashion was as much about appearance as function, miniature umbrellas sticking out from shoes looked, quite frankly, absurd. Gentlemen and women who attempted to wear them found that passers-by could not help but stare, chuckle, or point. The concept, while ingenious in theory, lacked elegance, which was crucial for widespread adoption. Perhaps the most ironic failure, however, was the very problem the invention sought to solve: keeping shoes dry. The tiny umbrellas protected only a fraction of the shoe's surface. Water still splashed up from puddles, seeped around the edges, or ran down from the pants or skirts above. In the end, the wearer often arrived at their destination with shoes no drier than if they had simply braved the rain unaided. Despite these failures, the umbrella for shoes did gain a moment of fame. Demonstrations at trade shows and patent exhibitions drew curious crowds. People laughed, tried the devices, and sometimes even purchased novelty versions. Inventors were praised for their creativity, if not for their practicality. Magazines and newspapers of the era occasionally featured illustrations of foot umbrellas, often accompanied by witty commentary about the extremes of human ingenuity. The invention also found some advocates. A few individuals with very narrow needs, such as those walking on specific surfaces or during light drizzle, reported limited success. Some versions incorporated springs or adjustable angles, and in carefully controlled conditions, they did offer marginal protection. Yet, these successes were rare exceptions, not the rule. In hindsight, the umbrella for shoes serves as a fascinating example of the limits of invention. It illustrates how focusing too narrowly on one aspect of a problem, protecting shoes, can lead to a solution that ignores practical realities like balance, aesthetics, and human behavior. It also highlights the tension between cleverness and usability. An idea can be brilliantly conceived in theory, yet fail spectacularly in practice. Interestingly, the concept has persisted in memory more than in reality. Even today, historical discussions of odd inventions often include references to these miniature umbrellas. They are remembered not for their success, but for their ambition, creativity, and sheer audacity. In a sense, they have achieved immortality, not by functioning effectively, but by capturing the imagination of people who marvel at humanity's desire to solve every problem, even ones that perhaps don't need solving. Modern parallels exist. Today, novelty inventions like shoe umbrellas occasionally appear on crowdfunding sites, often accompanied by viral videos showing people struggling to walk in them. The humor remains intact, and the lesson remains the same. An idea can be charming, clever, and entirely impractical all at once. The shoe umbrella reminds us that not all inventions need to succeed to be memorable. Some, in fact, achieve greatness precisely because they fail in spectacularly human ways. They are snapshots of creativity, optimism, and the endless drive to improve daily life, even when the results are humorous, awkward, or entirely useless. Ultimately, the umbrella for shoes holds a special place in history. It stands as a symbol of imaginative ambition, of the human urge to protect, innovate, and outsmart the environment, even when the solution is hilariously misaligned with reality. For historians, inventors, and storytellers, it serves as a reminder that failure can be as enlightening as success, that creativity is valuable even when the outcome is impractical, and that sometimes the most useless inventions are also the most entertaining. Section 10. The Baby Cage, a balcony solution that went too far. The history of human invention is dotted with attempts to solve everyday problems, often in ways that today seem bizarre, even alarming. Among these, one of the most peculiar and unsettling was the baby cage, a contraption designed in the early 20th century to provide infants with fresh air while keeping them safely confined. At first glance, it seems reasonable. In a time when urban living was increasingly cramped, with children often exposed to pollution and limited sunlight, the idea of a suspended outdoor nursery seemed progressive. However, like many inventions that straddle the line between ingenuity and impracticality, the baby cage reveals both human creativity and human hubris. The concept of the baby cage emerged in the 1920s, primarily in Europe and North America, when apartment living was becoming the norm in cities like London, New York, and Paris. Families with small flats often lacked outdoor space, and public parks could be crowded, dirty, or inconveniently located. Medical professionals at the time emphasized the benefits of fresh air for children, claiming it could prevent illness, improve sleep, and enhance overall health. Inventors and designers sought to reconcile these medical recommendations with the limitations of urban life, and the baby cage was born. Structurally, the baby cage was a small metal or wooden enclosure, often measuring around 4 feet square, with mesh sides to allow air and sunlight to pass through. It was designed to be attached to a window or balcony, suspended above the street below. The cage was intended to provide a secure environment where a baby could play, nap, or simply enjoy fresh air without parental supervision at all times. Some models featured padded interiors, small toys, and even adjustable shading to protect the child from direct sunlight. The invention gained attention quickly, and advertisements for baby cages appeared in magazines and newspapers. Claims ranged from "your child will grow healthier and stronger" to "the perfect solution for city living." Some illustrations depicted happy infants peering out from their cages, with proud parents observing from the apartment. On paper, the device seemed like a logical fusion of urban practicality and medical advice, an elegant solution to a modern problem. Yet, as often happens with ambitious inventions, the reality was far more complicated. Safety concerns were immediate and severe. Although designers implemented locks, railings, and reinforced mesh, accidents were inevitable. Babies could wiggle, tip, or even push against the mesh, and there were reports of cages detaching from windows or balconies. The idea of leaving an infant suspended above the street struck many observers as alarming, particularly as city streets could be busy with pedestrians, vehicles, and bicycles. Another challenge was environmental exposure. While fresh air was generally beneficial, weather conditions were not always predictable. Rain, wind, and pushing against the mesh. Rain could get anywhere and eventually lead to doctrine controversies, such as asthma, scares, and dangers. Not everyone is acting out before them. Or sudden temperature changes could compromise the comfort and safety of a child in a baby cage. Some models included covers or awnings, but these were often insufficient to protect against harsh weather, leaving parents to constantly monitor the situation, despite the invention's promise of independence. The very urban environments that inspired the baby cage could also render it hazardous, with dust, smoke, and noise permeating the mesh walls. Aesthetic and social concerns also emerged. Neighbors often found baby cages unsettling or even grotesque, with infants dangling precariously above busy streets. Building regulations and tenant agreements sometimes prohibited cages, and architects questioned whether such attachments could compromise the structural integrity of windows and balconies. While some parents praised the device for providing their children with exposure to sunlight and fresh air, others criticized it as unnecessary, risky, and potentially negligent. Despite these criticisms, the baby cage was marketed aggressively for over a decade. It represented a cultural moment when medical theory, urban living, and inventive thinking intersected in unusual ways. Parents who adopted the cages were often praised in contemporary literature and advertising as enlightened and modern, willing to embrace the latest innovations for the benefit of their children. In some ways, the baby cage reflected optimism about human ingenuity, the belief that problems caused by modern life could be solved with clever devices, even when those solutions appeared extreme. The invention's popularity was uneven. In some cities, baby cages were relatively common, with entire apartment blocks outfitted with suspended nurseries. Photographs from the period show children peering out from wire cages above streets, seemingly oblivious to the potential dangers. In other locations, the devices were rare, either due to practical limitations, safety concerns, or local regulations. Museums and historical archives today occasionally display remnants of these cages, serving as tangible reminders of past attempts to adapt human needs to the constraints of urban life. The baby cage ultimately fell out of favor by the mid-20th century. Several factors contributed to its decline. Improved understanding of child safety, changes in urban design, and the development of indoor playpens and other safer alternatives. Parents increasingly recognized the risks of leaving children suspended outside, and building codes tightened to prevent the attachment of such devices. Medical opinion also shifted, emphasizing supervised outdoor play and controlled exposure rather than unsupervised suspension above city streets. Yet, the baby cage remains a fascinating case study in the history of invention. It illustrates how well-intentioned ideas can go awry when the practical realities of physics, human behavior, and environmental conditions are overlooked. It also highlights the ways cultural values, such as the emphasis on modernity, health, and efficiency, can drive innovation, sometimes leading to solutions that seem almost absurd to later generations. The baby cage embodies a particular historical optimism, a belief that ingenuity and technology could tame the challenges of urban life, even if the results were occasionally terrifying. In a broader sense, the baby cage reminds us that invention is rarely just about utility. It is also about aspiration, imagination, and experimentation. Even when devices fail or fall into disuse, they provide insight into the problems, priorities, and creativity of the time. The cage serves as a historical lesson that the line between genius and folly is often thin, and that the most memorable inventions are sometimes those that challenge our expectations of what is safe, sensible, or practical. In modern culture, the baby cage occasionally appears in discussions of historical oddities, parenting trends, and urban life. It is frequently cited in lists of bizarre inventions, alongside foot umbrellas, self-stirring pots, and other curious devices. The fascination is understandable. The concept combines ingenuity with audacity, practicality with risk, and optimism with absurdity. For historians, inventors, and storytellers, it represents a moment when human creativity reached both impressive and unsettling heights, demonstrating that the desire to improve life can sometimes produce results that are memorable precisely because they were impractical, dangerous, or wildly imaginative. Section 11. The Electric Facial Mask, Beauty and Shock Combined. In the early 20th century, as electricity began to transform homes, workplaces, and even medical practices, inventors started to explore its potential for personal care. Among the more unusual outcomes of this trend was the electric facial mask, a device designed to improve skin health, reduce wrinkles, and even energize the face through the application of mild electrical currents. Today, the idea of strapping wires and electrodes to your face for cosmetic purposes seems peculiar, even alarming. Yet in its time, the electric facial mask was marketed as a cutting-edge innovation, a glimpse of the future of beauty and technology. The origins of the electric facial mask can be traced to the 1890s and early 1900s, a period when electricity was rapidly becoming a household commodity. Inventors and entrepreneurs were eager to capitalize on public fascination with electricity, applying it to everything from hair curlers to massage devices. Beauty salons and department stores advertised electrical treatments as a way to rejuvenate the skin, stimulate circulation, and ward off the visible effects of aging. It was believed that the mild electric currents could improve blood flow, encourage collagen production, and even lift sagging features. The electric facial mask was a logical extension of these ideas, offering a comprehensive, scientific approach to skincare. Structurally, the mask was a rigid device, often made of metal or thin rubber, shaped to cover the entire face. Electrodes were strategically positioned to contact the forehead, cheeks, chin, and jawline, delivering a low-voltage current. Some models incorporated additional features, such as springs or vibrating mechanisms, intended to massage the skin simultaneously. The masks were typically connected to a power source via wires, and users would adjust the current according to comfort, often with the guidance of salespeople or instruction manuals. Advertisements for electric facial masks were extravagant, promising dramatic transformations with minimal effort. Illustrations depicted women with smooth, radiant skin, lifted features, and sparkling eyes, often accompanied by slogans such as "The Secret of Eternal Youth" or "The Miracle of Modern Science." Testimonials claimed that even the most severe signs of aging could be reversed with regular use, presenting the device as an essential item for any sophisticated, forward-thinking woman. In a time when consumer culture and medical mystique intersected, the electric facial mask appeared both scientific and luxurious. Despite its claims, the practical effects of the mask were at best marginal. Mild electrical currents could provide a temporary tingling sensation or increased circulation, but there is little evidence that they had lasting cosmetic benefits. In fact, some users reported discomfort, burns, or skin irritation. The experience of wearing the mask was itself unusual. One could imagine sitting alone with a rigid, metallic appliance strapped to one's face, wires snaking around the head. As the current flowed through delicate facial muscles, while proponents praised the treatment as invigorating, critics noted the awkwardness and potential dangers of the device. The electric facial mask reflects a broader historical trend in which medical and cosmetic claims were loosely regulated, allowing inventors to market products that blended science, fantasy, and aspiration. At a time when understanding of dermatology and electrical safety was limited, public enthusiasm often outweighed caution. Beauty and technology were intertwined, and consumers were willing to experiment with novel devices in pursuit of youthful appearance. In retrospect, the mask seems like a cautionary tale, a reminder that technological optimism can sometimes lead to bizarre, impractical, or hazardous inventions. The device also provides insight into gender and societal expectations. Electric facial masks were primarily marketed to women, reflecting cultural pressures to maintain youth and attractiveness. The invention promised not only aesthetic improvement, but also social validation, suggesting that one's ability to access the latest technology could confer status. In this sense, the mask was not merely a cosmetic tool, but a symbol of modernity, sophistication, and engagement with contemporary scientific progress. It was as much about social positioning as personal care. Despite its decline in popularity by the 1930s and 1940s, the electric facial mask left a lasting legacy. Modern beauty devices, including microcurrent facial treatments and electronic toning machines, can trace conceptual roots to these early experiments. Today, such devices are often more refined, safer, and scientifically validated, yet the spirit of innovation remains. Inventors continue to explore ways to combine technology with personal care. The electric facial mask stands as a vivid example of the early intersection of electricity and aesthetics, a device that was both fascinating and impractical, futuristic and slightly terrifying. From a historical perspective, the electric facial mask is fascinating not only for its design, but also for its cultural significance. It embodies the optimism experimentation, and sometimes naive faith in technology that characterized the early 20th century. Consumers were eager to embrace novel inventions, especially those promising health, beauty, and social advantage. Advertisements, manuals, and promotional materials reveal a society captivated by innovation, willing to suspend skepticism in pursuit of the ideal, whether that ideal was youthful skin, social status, or the thrill of participating in the technological revolution. The mask also serves as a cautionary tale in the history of invention. It highlights the fine line between creative ingenuity and impracticality, between enthusiasm for innovation and neglect of practical or safety considerations. While the electric facial mask is now regarded as a curious oddity, it reflects universal patterns in human invention: the desire to improve life, the drive to harness technology, and the willingness to take risks in pursuit of perceived benefits. In this sense, the mask is more than a historical curiosity. It is a lens through which to examine the ways society, technology, and human ambition intersect. Finally, the electric facial mask demonstrates the ephemeral nature of some inventions. Despite the fanfare, the device did not endure, replaced by safer, more effective solutions as knowledge of science, electricity, and human physiology advanced. Its disappearance from the market reminds us that not all innovations survive, even if they capture the imagination of their time. Yet, as a historical artifact, it continues to fascinate, illustrating how humans have always sought inventive solutions to everyday problems, even when those solutions are peculiar, impractical, or slightly alarming. Section 12. The Anti-Eating Mask, a strange attempt at dieting. As societies have wrestled with the challenges of health, weight management, and self-control, inventors have occasionally turned to unusual and extreme measures. One of the more striking examples from history is the anti-eating mask, a device designed to prevent overeating by physically restricting the act of consuming food. Unlike modern diet plans or behavioral strategies, the anti-eating mask attempted to impose discipline through sheer mechanical intervention, demonstrating how inventive thinking can sometimes veer into the bizarre, impractical, and slightly horrifying. The anti-eating mask first appeared in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a period when concerns about health, appearance, and social propriety were rapidly evolving. As urbanization and industrialization changed lifestyles, the prevalence of sedentary work, processed foods, and novel culinary indulgences prompted new anxieties about diet and weight. Inventors sought technological solutions to social problems, and the anti-eating mask emerged as an extreme response. If self-control failed, why not use a device to enforce it physically? Structurally, the anti-eating mask was a headgear that covered the lower face, particularly the mouth and jaw area. Made from metal, leather, or rigid plastics, the mask often featured spikes, bars, or locks to prevent the wearer from opening their mouth fully. Some models were designed to allow minimal speech, but effectively blocked biting and chewing motions. In other versions, straps secured the device around the head, while small locks or clasps ensured it could not be removed without external assistance. The goal was simple, yet draconian. The wearer would be prevented from eating, whether at home, at social gatherings, or in public. Advertisements and promotional materials for the anti-eating mask framed the device as both practical and morally virtuous. It was marketed to individuals struggling with weight, but also to parents, caretakers, and even employers, suggesting that self-control and restraint were not just personal choices, but societal responsibilities. Slogans such as "Control your appetite, control your life," and "A friend to temperance and health" accompanied illustrations depicting solemn men and women wearing the mask, symbolizing both obedience and dedication to self-improvement. The mask became a tangible representation of the desire for discipline in an increasingly indulgent world. Despite its intentions, the anti-eating mask was inherently impractical. Human behavior is complex, and controlling eating through mechanical restriction proved difficult. Reports from users indicated discomfort, irritation, and, in some cases, outright pain. The rigid structure of the mask could cause sores on the skin, headaches, and strain on the jaw. Moreover, the social implications were severe. Wearing such a device in public was highly conspicuous, attracting attention, ridicule, or even fear. For all its claims of discipline, the mask placed the wearer in a vulnerable and uncomfortable position, emphasizing the disconnect between invention and real-life application. The anti-eating mask also reflects deeper societal anxieties about self-control, morality, and the body. At a time when dietary restraint was linked not only to health but to virtue, inventions like this one symbolized the externalization of moral discipline. Instead of relying solely on willpower, individuals could delegate responsibility to a device. The mask embodies a cultural desire for technological shortcuts to personal and ethical improvement, a fascination with mechanical solutions to psychological and social challenges that persists in various forms even today. Interestingly, the anti-eating mask has parallels with modern dieting technologies. Contemporary inventions, such as smart wearables that monitor caloric intake, portion control devices, or apps that track eating patterns, share a conceptual lineage with these historical devices. Both eras reveal a desire to outsource discipline to technology. However, modern approaches are less physically invasive and prioritize subtle behavioral nudges over direct mechanical restriction. The mask, by contrast, represents an extreme approach, a literal and tangible imposition on the body to enforce social and personal ideals. The anti-eating mask also raises ethical and practical questions. Who should have the authority to enforce diet through mechanical means? What are the psychological effects of being constrained in such a manner? Historical accounts suggest that, in practice, the device was more a curiosity or novelty than a serious solution. Yet its existence reminds us that the search for convenience, self-improvement, and control can lead to unusual, sometimes troubling inventions. The mask challenges our understanding of ingenuity, showing how creativity can be simultaneously fascinating and absurd. By the mid-20th century, the anti-eating mask largely disappeared, replaced by more sophisticated approaches to weight management, including medical guidance, exercise, and psychological strategies. Its decline illustrates how inventions that prioritize novelty over practicality often fail to endure. However, as a historical artifact, the anti-eating mask continues to captivate imaginations, serving as a cautionary tale about the extremes of innovation, the dangers of physical imposition, and the human tendency to seek external solutions for internal struggles. Reflecting on the anti-eating mask also invites broader contemplation about the history of invention. Many creations, like this one, occupy a curious space between utility and absurdity. They embody the hopes, anxieties, and cultural values of their era, revealing how societal pressures shape innovation. While modern readers may view the mask with incredulity or amusement, its story offers insight into human ambition. The desire to control the body, master behavior, and solve problems in ways that blend imagination, technology, and sometimes sheer audacity. The history of useless inventions is a journey into human creativity at its most daring, peculiar, and sometimes reckless. From devices designed to shock the skin for beauty, to contraptions that physically prevent eating, these inventions reveal both our ingenuity and our occasional absurdity. They remind us that innovation is not always synonymous with utility, and that cultural values, social pressures, and technological optimism often guide inventors as much as practical needs do. While these devices rarely survive the test of time, they endure as fascinating artifacts, mirrors of human curiosity, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of solutions, no matter how improbable or bizarre. Among all these inventions, perhaps none is as striking as the anti-eating mask, a device that literally attempted to impose discipline, control behavior, and reshape human habits through mechanical restraint, illustrating the lengths to which people have gone in their quest for improvement, even at the expense of comfort, dignity, or common sense.